just a little leadership story, and Jim was as well. Um, they worked on a product with me. We got that product finished. They entered the hackathon. We all did an invention together. We filed a patent together. So like leadership skills work, and you'll kind of see why. And I didn't really divulge my secrets at the time. I told them I went to school for leadership. That was one of my scholarships. They knew I was a computer engineer, but now I guess they'll see the secret and the sauce here and see what I'm doing to make that stuff work, because it is all written down. It was all trained. It doesn't come naturally like you might think. You have to practice it being a good leader. So when I talk about writing things down, I'm talking about principles or the things we do as leaders that give us guidance. And so this is a picture of a rock here. It's just representing that your principles are your foundation. And so, and then one of the things we'll talk about is these things you do every day or your daily habits. If those reflect your principles, you'll make a better leader. And you might be thinking, oh, I don't really want to go into management, or I don't want to be a CEO, or I like the engineering stuff. I do too. But as you'll see, as you grow in your career, even at say the second, third, fourth level of engineer, you're expected to be a team lead. You're expected to be an architect. You're expected to be some kind of multiplier to make others better, a training, mentoring. So leadership is incredibly important, even if you're not in the management or a people management type of role. And you might find, because it's not so obvious, it's more important in these individual contributor roles that you'll grow if you demonstrate leadership skills, and that's even along the most technical track. I think it's important when we talk about things like principles that we define them, and I know dictionary.com isn't the best, and you can always like submit new definitions if you want, but this definition is probably here to stay, that a principle is a fundamental truth or proposition that serves as the foundation for system belief or behavior for a chain of reasoning. So it's saying these are the guideposts that I put in for what I do every day and how I treat other people. And it's different. You might think principle based because we all had principles in school. That's AL is how that word is, So this is not principle about like headmaster or dean or that type of thing. It's principle as in truth or rule. And it's very important that these don't get dated, and you'll see what I talk about here. We're going to go back in history pretty far and talk about some of the beginnings of principle-based leadership. So, I just got back from Denver here, but here's some signs I went by riding my bike. But words to live by is maybe the layman's term where you can explain what principles are. But if you have decision points, or if you have all these judgments you have to make throughout the day, you can always turn to your principles and find a way to solve the problem. And know what it will you'll remember all of these, because as we get to the habits of engineers and developers, he'll remember all these things as we brought them up and went along and talked about the ways we can solve problems, and I even pointed them kind of one at a time to my lessons on some of these things, but here we'll collect them all together. So we're talking 800 years ago with Genghis Khan. Sometimes you'll hear it Genghis Khan. One of the first principle-based leaders, and you could say the most successful leader in history. Ruled more land. More humans descend from him than any other person in history. And read what these things are, because you'll look at these very modern leadership books and even my own principles. They really come from Genghis Khan's 9, which is strange. So if you think of have an end in mind, we're going to talk a lot about begin with the end in mind, and that'll be one of the principles we dive a little bit deeper on. But I do a whole hour presentation on that, about if you're an engineer, you got to draw pictures, you got to architect, you got to know exactly what you're doing before you get into the weeds and the code and the engineering design, because you can get lost if you go right into the details. Lead from the front, that's just another way to say lead by example. So he's saying, set a good example and you'll get followers. And that's true in everything you do. You'll see I have a principle kind of aligned to this: serve a greater good than yourself. And so it's make life easier for yourself and make life easier for others. And it's about simplifying, automating things. You think of all of what computer engineering is about is we're making labor saving devices that make life easier. And so much of it is about the greater good and working with large teams and doing something that you could not do alone. And then, similar to have an end in mind, have a vision. Where is this thing going overall? What are we doing, with this project we're working on? That's from Genghis Khan also. And then you think, be self-reliant. So how important is that? That sometimes I describe this one, as if not me, then who? When someone gives you a task, you're not trying to offload that or find someone else to substitute. You say, I'm the best person for this. I can do it, and you get right in the middle of that. Be humble. You're going to see something I talk about. Don't worry about who gets credit, and you'll find that way of treating other people gets you more credit than you ever imagined. It's by accident, and it's I guess an unintended consequence. But if you find yourself where you don't have to be like, that was my idea, that's me, then you accomplish way more because of how your team works with you and respects you. Be moderate, don't do anything extremes, understand your people, and then change the world, but change it gradually. And so we're going to see things like focus on one thing at a time, and those others that are rooted, like I said, more than 800 years ago when Genghis Khan ruled the steppe. So my first real job out of school was, my favorite company at the time, HP. I had HP calculators. I always had HP printers that worked really well. Their computers were always super high quality, and I worked for them when I was really young, like 16 in high school. And so and they always gave me HP stuff to take home, and so that was really cool. So it was always just neat to have this company in my hometown that was really the origin of Silicon Valley. So you see the garage here, and I worked there in year 2000, and upper management came down with these new rules, but they're really from 1939. And along with these, you had to get this book called The HP Way, which is another really good book about soft skills and leadership and is sort of worth a whole presentation on its own. But then look at what we have here. Like, believe you can change the world, work quickly, keep the tools unlocked, work whenever, know when to work alone and when to work together, share tools, ideas, trust your colleagues, no politics, no bureaucracy. The customer defines a job well done. Radical ideas are not bad ideas. Invent different ways of working. Make a contribution every single day. If it doesn't contribute, don't send it out. And then believe that together we can do anything. And then my favorite, of course, invent. And so I built a thing, a lot of people know this, like in 2012, HP had, or not HP, but NCR had a big innovation competition where you got to meet the CEO. And I put together my own little kind of set of principles like this. And I just submitted that. And it won. And that was kind of cool, where the CTO at the time, we got to hang out. So I work for NCR now, and I really like it. And if you think of our new technology leadership, the main thing they're bringing is 3 principles, and I'll kind of explain how big these are in general ways. But you think about these in your projects or your computer engineering. How do we think about things so people want to use them and we give them choices? We make APIs first, and that's application programming interface. But you're making things that people can extend on their own without having to take everything from you. So if you think of, if you could write a new user interface for Windows, or if you make an app and you can use things like from Facebook and Square and Twitter, like, it's pretty neat when they give you choices and empower you to use this cool technology on the back end, and then you can make your own app. And so API first, is timeless and very key, and then it grows into the future as we think about clouds and the ubiquity of technology. Putting that at the forefront makes you happy and your customers happy. And we'll talk about win-win a bit when we get to leadership principles. Common capabilities. So make life easier for yourself, make life easier for others. So if we think about this person over here is making this fancy payment technology, I need fancy payment technology. Let's get together. And so, you probably see that giant campus we have downtown, which will open up, again next year. But when we were there, you could walk into two buildings and find anybody working on anything and share ideas and then say, hey, let's use the same GitHub, and how about this part goes here and that part goes there. And now your whole company is better because you don't have to build something on your own that somebody already did. And community source, you've probably heard about the open source world, like the birth of Linux, which is the largest team engineering project in history, over 1 million people. You would think about other open source contributions we like. Noah did his project this summer in Go, which is an open source runtime. We use Node and NPM. We use React Native. We use all kinds of open source tech because the community makes things better. But then when we make something proprietary to NCR, we invite the whole company to help us out, and that's called inner sourcing. And you can see Microsoft started doing it big. Tools like GitHub make it easier. But that idea of, hey, I'll let you help me out, and we'll grow the team bigger than we ever thought. You make really good products, and you get that sense of community, and we even get volunteers to help because they love doing this stuff so much. So those are principles we work by today, and they work. And you notice with our Net Promoter Score, or people liking NCR products, it does get better with these things. So when I started college, I had a leadership scholarship, and I was like, this is so cool. A book about, and then I had to go get my books, and as we all sit there getting all the books required for each class, they didn't tell us this is a book we'd get, and you kind of pick that up off the shelf, and you're like, self-help, like, what's this about? But it actually is the leadership foundation, and so and you'll see this everywhere. Once you start looking, you'll see it's for sale at Kinko's. It's extremely popular, and people like it. You'll even see people have their desktops with the 7 habits, and I even base my 7 habits of effective developers off of this. And I think Jim or Noah asked me, why do people always pick 7? And the reason I've always heard is because you can remember 7 things. You can remember 7 digits and a phone number. And so we tend to stop there when it comes to lists of things we have to remember. But what they are is be proactive, and that's as the opposite of reactive. So if you're always just responding to problems, then you're not being as effective as you could be. But if you're reaching out and trying to solve those problems before they happen, or come up with solutions to things people haven't even thought of before, then you're being effective, and that's what proactive is about. So we've talked a lot about begin with the end in mind, and so that's the draw picture. We'll talk a little bit more about that in detail because that's one of my habits of 7 developers, and notice there was 2 of Genghis Khan's that relate to that. So that's super important, that you know what you're going to do before you do it. And we'll even talk about some communication skills, which I had said, your next talk is going to be about. But we don't say things until we know what the intent is or what we're trying to get out of saying things. So this one extends past leadership, past habits, and is very effective in engineering. Put first things first. That's just a cute way to say prioritize. If you think about what made Apple so successful, as their leader Steve Jobs at the time knew how to put the very most important thing at the top and focus on that. And there's a little story. We all know how successful the Macintosh was. But he would go around the company and look for people still working on the Apple II, and we saw one of the engineers working on it, and he got kind of upset, and he said, what are you doing there? And the guy said, well, I'm still finishing up some Apple II stuff. And we all know Steve Jobs. He pulled the plug out of the wall and picked the whole computer up and threw it in the trash can and said, no, you're working on Macintosh now. And so that was how they kind of prioritized and made that next gen of computers that we all have come to love with the GUI and everything. So prioritizing is very important, and getting people working on the right things. And that was his resurrection at Apple. It's like, we got great people, we're just working on the wrong things. And so we can see in the computer engineering world, that's one of the most effective things we can use. So think win-win. So in the world of business and technology, they aren't zero-sum games. So it's not like poker where you have a winner and a loser. You're trying to take somebody's money. And especially in computers, we're adding efficiency to the world, which make money for both parties. So you think of, how NCR works with its customers. It's we are successful when you are successful, and so we add technology to the mix, and then you get that mix of hey, when you make more money or benefit or make your customers happy, we do too. And so that's what that principle is about. Is we're not trying to think win-lose, it's win-win, and that can help in just your everyday negotiation or that type of thing. And we'll talk a bit about fairness, but when you think about what the other person is going to get, then you tend to get more yourself. So then seek first to understand, then to be understood. It's another cute way of saying, be a good listener. You'll hear about the best salespeople are not the ones that are the most extroverted. They're the ones that listen more, nor are they the most introverted because they never say anything. It's the people that tend to fall in the middle of, I'm going to listen to what you have to say first, and then I'm going to find the car that's right for you. Or you think the salesperson selling our technology, they're going to go in and try to figure out that customer's problem and then try to get the right technology solution in place for that particular customer. And you'll see, like, there was even a time when it was about 30% of all sales executives in America, they started at NCR. So it's a very historic company when it comes to sales. And if you walk around our building, you'll see all these like old sales manuals that Patterson made us famous with. Synergize, and so I don't even know what this word meant, back in the day. I just got into college. It's creating a whole that's greater than the sum of the parts. And so we're going to talk a bit about Lisa Su and her leadership of AMD, but it's all about bringing people together. And so you're computer engineers. No one person makes that microchip. In fact, you think of something as complex as what AMD or Intel is going to offer, you might have 1,000 people working on that thing, and they have to trust each other and make that thing work together. And then you get stuff that we can almost never imagine. And then sharpen the saw. This is another nice way to say be a continuous learner. So you'll notice, we're upskilling. Noah and Jim started with me in the summer. Like, we weren't afraid to take on new languages, new databases, new anything to make the thing we wanted to work. We're not afraid to take on new skills, and we like taking on new skills. And you'll find your time in college isn't about learning everything you need to do at a job. It's learning how to pick up any book off the shelf or any piece of technology and dive in and figure it out and use it to solve your problem, your customer's problem, and your company's problem. So after we finished that book, there's one. Notice this one doesn't say 25 million copies sold, and it's a little harder to find. And you're like, why wouldn't this be the book about leadership? Because it's really not. It's the second one, but it doesn't. It doesn't focus on the foundational habits as much, and so that's what I want you guys to get out of this. As we'll kind of move on to the second half of this presentation. Is the habit focus initially is how you build your principles. And then as you do leadership over time, you can figure out what your more leadership-based characteristics and principles are. But you can see these aren't too different than what we just talked about. Continually learning, sharpen the saw, service-oriented, make life easier for yourself, make life easier for others. Positive energy, so it's lead by example, don't be a negative. And so that's something to remember when we're talking about our soft skills. Believe in other people, so you think synergize and trust each other, lead balanced lives. So we're going to talk about, we don't do our best work if all we do is engineering. So like I think I mentioned, I'm the inventor of the year. I innovate, and the way I find out all these things is by talking with people, by going to places. I travel. I was just in New Zealand for the first month of this year. Been to Japan and Paris, and so I'm always looking for what are other people in other countries and other places doing to solve their things, and then I bring that back to my engineering skill rather than just doing engineering all the time. And then they see life as an adventure. So if you're always excited, you think, hey, challenges aren't sad, they're fun, they're exciting. And then synergistic, we'll talk about this, it's that um, we are part of a greater good. And then you even saw that with Genghis Khan's principle. So it's not too different. But you see, these are a little more I'll say complex, but saying, hey, you've had some experience doing leadership, but as I just pointed out, they're actually the same as the habits, and that's why this is not too different from that first book. So that first book really was about leadership. So we'll mention this many times. If you build good habits and they're principle based, and then people will trust you more, you'll get followers, you'll get put into leadership roles. And then you can start saying, hey, now I'm doing this, working with other people and, having other people listen to what I say. Then you can turn those habits into good principles. And that's what I'll do from a computer engineering or software engineering and leadership point of view with the rest of the presentation. So I've been put into leadership roles a lot. So it's even my first job at HP, they put me right in charge of making analog to digital converters for image scanners. I thought that was so cool. You get to capture all that electricity and turn it into color. And you get people coming in from Japan and California, to work with you. And so leadership's fun, and if you demonstrate it, there's a big need for it because you're getting other engineers and other technologists to do more, and so it's valuable to anybody if you have good leadership skills. And then lead by example. So I don't we'll see my 6 principles here. We'll talk a little bit about detail, just come from that experience. So I've been in some kind of technology leadership role for about 20 years now, and at several different companies and different roles. Even at NCR, I've been in hospitality, and now I'm in retail, and I've worked in renewable energy. And so I'll just kind of show you what I've learned and what actually works to get people to get more out of themselves than they even thought they could themselves. A lot of this one comes from a book called Say This, Not That. You'll see at Microsoft, they make everybody read a book called Nonviolent Communication. But communicating directly is one of the most effective things you can do as a leader. So you got to think, if you're speaking to a large audience, something like sarcasm, only half the people will understand. And so it's almost never an effective communication technique. It's probably okay one-on-one if you're trying to be funny or people get that. But if you're trying to ask somebody to do something, it's not an effective way to communicate. And similarly with rhetorical questions, we don't ask things to shame people or to try to make people feel embarrassed. We only ask questions when we expect there to be an answer. And so if you hear those things that are rhetorical, like really question mark, then you're not really communicating directly because you're asking a question, but you're not expecting an answer. It relates to begin with the end in mind, but it's know what you want to accomplish before saying anything. And this is really hard if you think about it. It takes a long time to learn because a lot of us just kind of open our mouth and say stuff. But if you dial that down and say, I'm going to think about exactly what I want to accomplish before I say anything, then you can focus on what you're really trying to do in your leadership skill. And people appreciate that and respect that because they don't have to sift through what you're saying to figure out what you're getting at. And then you've already decided in your head or by writing it down, what are you really getting at? And part of my minimalist personality, and this is really effective, is just say exactly what is needed and nothing more. So this says if I know what I want to accomplish, I'm going to say just that, and I'll stop. And I don't have to keep elaborating or doing more or add more color. It's just, that's it. And then people appreciate that because it's less stuff to sift through for what are you trying to communicate. And this one's, I'll say it's challenging, but it's if you listen for it, it gets easier. So if you're never trying to motivate somebody to do something with any of these three things, and it's the big ones are guilt, blame, or insults. And so if you ever find that's your way of motivating or getting somebody to do something, it's not going to be effective as a leader. So you got to figure out how to say something, even when something's really broken or really problematic. How do I get this fixed without using any of these three things? And there's a way to say that in every single case. And you'll learn little tricks like, use the word in instead of but, or, you empathize, be emotionally intelligent. And then this one gets easier over time. So you make sure what you're trying to do is solve the problem, get information, but not wing these things around. And it'll kind of relate to something you'll want to remember. People will always remember how you made them feel, but they'll rarely remember what you said or did. And so keep that in mind as you try to work with people. Noah's Jim saw some of this during the summer. I would dive into the code with every single one of them and help anybody solve any problem, no matter what their role is. So when someone asks for help or someone's behind on a task, we treat it like a team. So if we're asking somebody to come in on the weekend or do something at night, I do it too. And so that's just how we get a lot of things done, where you tend to build a lot of respect on people with people if we're getting things accomplished by doing it ourselves. And you'll notice a lot of corporate leaders are just that. You're not going to see anybody asking a bunch of people to do something that they haven't done in the past or will do today with you. And that's a lot of, if you think of the habits make good leadership principles, that's a good way to get there. It's saying, hey, if I'm going to have all these expectations of others, I'll do that the same. And that's really effective. This is a lot based in psychology that give people choices. And it's not about false choices, but we want people to discover things. And we'll talk a little bit about this as we get into some of my development principles. But we don't want to tell people exactly how to do anything. So I think Noah probably remembers when he started, we could pick from 5 languages to do our project. We could pick from 4 different databases. We could pick any kind of framework we wanted to do inside of those languages or with those databases to get the job accomplished. And all of them made really good decisions. And so it's like, oh, hey, as long as I teach about, what each one is good for and why you might want to use this over that and what other people do, you can trust people to do it correctly, and they'll even add some insight and give you things or tell you stuff that you didn't know yourself. And so as long as you're focused on the result and you set up some guideposts around, we don't say you can use all 150 languages or frameworks. Say here's 5, then people do an excellent job. And also keep in mind, too many choices is debilitating. So when people sell things, there was an experiment where some lady tried to sell 10 flavors of jelly and never sold any. And then when she breaks it down to 3 or 4, she sells a lot. And so we want choices, but we don't want just unlimited. And that's part of the leader's role, is to distill that down or say, here's the good ones, but feel free to pick. Hopefully there's someone on the call that's heard of the ultimatum game, but if you haven't, you'll want to read about it, because it's a game theory and psychological thing that you'll want to know when interacting with other people. And we're all like this. So it's not like you're like that and I'm like this. No, everybody wants fairness and reasonableness. But what the ultimatum game is, it's an economic experiment that has been done at many, many schools and research institutions. And it's been, like I said, rooted in some of the mathematicians' game theory. One person is given a sum of money, and they're asked to split it with another person. But if you reject the offer and I'm splitting with you, we both get nothing. And so if you think, okay, I'm given, let's say, $1,000, and I have to split this, but if you don't like my offer, then neither of us get anything. So if you think from a mathematical point of view, that person would take even a penny, but they don't. And in fact, if you don't give them something close to half, they will reject it outright, and neither person will get anything. So if you think of how you apply that, we file patents and we always want like certain experts to help, but it's very hard to decide, what percentage did each person contribute? And they always ask us like, what percent did each person contribute? And we always split it equally because we want that person's help again, and we don't want to act like we're saying, oh, your contribution was less or this wasn't the same as that person. We're all people and we like fairness, and it's built into our heads to be that way. So if you respect this phenomenon and use it, you'll find you're a much more effective leader, you're better at working at teams, and you can get things accomplished in ways you maybe didn't think of. I'm good. Noah, Jim, notice this over the summer, and just this is similar. I don't tell you how to do anything. I don't say this is the best way to do that or this is the only way to do that. I almost never use absolutes, and that's an old lesson from one of our most famous leaders, Ben Franklin. And he discovered electricity. So you think the root of computer engineering, or as it is today, is from one of the greatest American leaders in history. Don't speak in absolutes and let people discover things on their own, but you're presenting the path or giving them enough information that's in line with what they want to do. And then if you see something that needs to be corrected, you help them out and correct that. But people learn things much better if they can make a few mistakes, fail at a few things, and then discover the right way. And then they're not doing it because you told them to do it that way, even though you might have guided toward that direction. They're doing it because they figured out that's the best way to do it. And then you get people invested in what they're doing to finish stuff, make it high quality, and it's a much more effective way to teach. It's very hard to do this. You'll think, oh, you didn't listen to me. It's like, no, I'm just gonna put this little bug in your ear, and then you'll hear it over and over and over again, and then eventually you'll think it's your idea, and that's what I wanted. So we're trying to and we're not trying to be forceful. All of us have things to learn, but sometimes you can lend your experience much more softly by doing it this way. This one's always also very tough to learn as well. It's a little bit about serve something greater than yourself. We're not doing these things because we want the medals and awards and first place and all that. If you just let that go completely, you'll be surprised. You'll probably still get recognized for some things, but as you're doing something, you're not trying to figure out, and I told you so, or that was my idea, or that type of thing. You're just trying to say, how do we solve this problem with our team energy, without trying to give somebody the medal that they came up with this. And I think Noah probably noticed, like, we have some ideas, but we pull a team together to pull our patents together because we're not trying to go it alone and say, I did all that. And then that never matters in the end. We talk about these software systems or CPUs that are built. There's thousands of people. It's no one person's idea. And yeah, you can give some credit to, say, the inventor of the transistor, the microprocessor, which is good. But in general, in our teams, forgetting about the credit will help you go further, and then you'll be, I guess, surprised when you do get credit for things because it gets noticed when your work gets that good. But always never be afraid to hand it out. We have a recognition system. We can always give like thank yous or say, hey, that was really awesome. This is a nice job. Or hey, that was your idea. Cool. So don't be afraid to give it. Don't be the one trying to take it. Steve Jobs isn't around anymore, but he is one of my favorite. You heard me talk about him a little bit, but that's the birth of Apple. And the resurrection of Apple and Pixar and Next Step. So you think of all this technology we use today. So much came from one person, but he wasn't a developer. He wasn't um, a designer. Like, he didn't do anything. He just led people. That was his whole skill, and that was pretty amazing. When we consider the story of Apple and Pixar and Next Step. And then Jeff Bezos, started Amazon in his garage. We'll talk about his principles as well, because you'll see a lot of technology today comes from this person. We have two pizza teams. We have a lot of accountability, a lot of ownership, and that's really the Amazon way. And Jim worked there for a little bit if you want to talk details about Amazon with him. And then our, Edison of today, Elon Musk with SpaceX and Tesla. So we're seeing what his principles are, because he's done some amazing things with many companies at once, and we've yet to see, the apex of this. As we see electric cars and space exploration go even further under his leadership. And think about how many of these guys are, technologists and computer engineers, or people, or they work on those type of with those type of technologies. And so Lisa Su is the CEO of AMD, and she's a New Yorker, has a PhD in computer engineering, and that's where AMD has got a lot of its resurrection, is under her leadership. So they used to barely compete with Intel. If you think, once described as an elephant trying to swat away a fly, and now they're a legitimate contender. And actually, more home PCs are made with AMD chips these days than Intel. One thing I like about Steve Jobs is he wrote things down, or other people did for him, but he was very principle based, and he would have principles of how to make a presentation, how to design products, everything, and so good at it, so good at focusing. So do what you love. Don't worry about how much money you're going to make. Find the thing you want to do, and that'll be a successful career. And you'll be surprised at if it does make money. And he's famous for saying, before Apple, I didn't care about money because I didn't have any. After Apple, I didn't care about money because I had a lot. So that was never his focus. He was just about bringing good ideas to people that wanted to use them. Put a dent in the universe. That's how he recruited the CEO of Pepsi to work for Apple. Like, do you want to make sugared water, or do you want to put a dent in the universe? So he used that expression a lot. And if you think about what Apple has done, it's almost that. Kickstart your brain. So you're going to see me begin with the end in mind, those type of things. But we draw things on whiteboards so we can talk with each other. You hear about traveling, like look for inspiration, look for other ideas. Don't think you can do it all on your own. Sell dreams, not products. That's another thing that came from Intel and Pepsi. Like, they're not telling you they're selling sand boiled down into microchips, or water with sugar in it. They're selling you something to aspire to. Look what you can make with this. Look who you can be with this. And so that's what he always did with his sales pitch, and they still do it today. They're really good at it. Say no to 1,000 things. So he said Apple's just as famous for what we don't do versus what we do. And so that's a big deal, and that's part of that prioritization. Put first things first. So do the things right you're good at. Create insanely great experiences. So we think of Apple products and what they do. It's all about how the user experiences it. And I'll talk about one. Design software with the user in mind, and write software with the user in mind. And that's what that's about. And then master the message. This is more of a marketing thing, and it's a little bit of that, know what you're going to say before you say anything, or know what you want to accomplish. But messages need to be simple, especially when they're public facing. And people that have gone to trade shows with me, we get our message drilled into us over and over, so we make sure we represent in the correct way. Mentioned a little bit about Jeff Bezos. Definitely different style from Steve Jobs. Accept occasional failure as the price of innovating. Work every day like it's your first day in business. So you think that startup culture and Amazon, they work hard. Ask Jim, like it's still like that, which is good. So is Apple. Give your customers what they want before they know they want it. So that's very much an Apple and Henry Ford thing. Henry Ford will say, if I asked people what they wanted, they would have told me a faster horse. And Steve Jobs saying, we're like not to where it is. And so you're trying to anticipate the needs before your customer tells you what they want. Elon Musk are a little more complex, but if we know him as a person, he's definitely more complex than either of those two. But move fast, do the impossible, constantly innovate, reason from first principles, think like owners, and we're all in. So these are very much akin to the others, and you see why he builds successful companies this way. And then you see, 3 different companies, and we'll get to a 4th one here, very similar, startup culture, do things like that you never thought you could. They all call out innovation. And then the 4th one is just about, using principles like we're talking about. And then owners, that's another Jeff Bezos one. He says no one ever takes a rental car in for a car wash, and a lot of the payment or what employees make at Amazon is in stock. And so when you're an owner of a company, you invest more. You're more invested in the success, and that motivates people. And then we're all in. It's going to be about teamwork, synergizing, that type of thing. But it's not all men. Lisa Sue is a very famous leader, and look how simple her principle is. She's very, very smart, like genius. She's a PhD in computer engineering, has brought in, AMD almost back from the dead, where you see their chips are powering nearly every supercomputer in the world. Every single Xbox and PlayStation has an AMD chip in it. The Nintendo Switch has an AMD chip in it. So it's as ubiquitous as Intel. They're slugging it out, especially in the laptop market where Intel, and the data center where Intel typically dominates. Now they got a real competitor. And so you think of what she's saying, for one principle, bring people together, and what it takes to design a chip, and then what it took to make things like Linux. Think what you can do with 10 people, 100 people, or 10,000. And that's how you can think about your growth with your career too. Your first job, you might want to think about making 10 people better. And then as you get promoted or find another job, how do you make 100 people better? And then you think more at the upper leadership or management level, how do you make 10,000 people better? Or being the architect, say, for a giant computer chip like the latest Intel architectures, that's also a leadership role with 10,000 people. So these are my 7 and what I come up with. And I actually do an hour on each of these, so we can go pretty deep into my 7 habits of highly effective developers. But they took a long time to come up with, and you saw, 20 years ago, I was, or a little bit more than that, but I was in a leadership school at CU along with my computer engineering, and so a lot of foundation in that. But then, I've been to Austin, Texas. I've, worked in Japan. I've been to India. I've, had teams all over the place. Even integrated a big customer in Paris. So. I've tried to put these together carefully, and we stopped at 7 for the reason I talked about. You'll remember 7, and they're foundational in what you do every day. And you're gonna, Jim and Noah, I think they sort of knew at the time, because every time I brought one up, I'd send them the presentation on it. But nearly every correction or thing we did was based on one of these. And so if you pick up on these early, you're going to go places, because then people will say, hey, you're really good to work with. I want to do what you're doing. And then that just scales and goes on up from there. So this is an old Genghis Khan was we talked about. Know what you're doing, but it's I still do it today. So if anybody gets in a pair programming or team session with me, all they're talking about is the code and this problem and this database part, I'll stop them every time. I'll say, no, explain the problem in layman's terms and show it to me before we talk about any details. And just that step sometimes gets the person to discover it on their own, what they're calling you in for to help them with in the first place. And if we're working on something, we sketch out everything before we dive into the code, because you'll just get lost in the details trying to solve this or that without knowing this thing you're trying to do. And then people notice when I interview or give away one of my interview questions, it's what makes this useful, or why did you work on this project that you worked on for this company? Why are they paying you money to do it? and you got to know where this part you're doing fits into the architecture. So you think if you're working on a computer chip, you got to know where the floating point unit or the ALU fits into the overall architecture or the pipeline, because that's how you get your job done. And then when you don't do this, you'll find people get so wrapped around the axle or tangled, it's hard to dig it out. And so this is why I always start with this one. So we get into the details after we have a clear picture, can describe it. And as part of that, don't think your entire job is done in front of the computer. Walk around, and it's just important that you kind of think about it from every perspective and then go in and finish it. And you're going to find that so much more effective. I give this one a simple name on purpose because you're going to see a lot of techniques in modern software, or pair programming, team programming, mob programming, and then a lot of those terms get stale, or people think it's not effective, or I tried that and it didn't work. But we talk about use the buddy system, and so it's one of those, everything I learned, I need to know today, I learned in kindergarten. You're trying to make friends on your first day. You're trying to find people working on similar things. You're trying to find people that want to work with you. And you're going to use these techniques to get to where you're going. So much of what we do every day is pair programming. And you guys know I'm a senior architect, so I come in and I'm always solving problems for people. And people have a good working relationship with me, so they're not scared to show me stuff, and then we fix it. I used to have, 3 rules at my old job. That's, finish what you start. When you're asked to help, and when you need help, you got to say so. And so you'll notice some of the people that move the furthest up, or you're just blown away by how much work they get done, they're the people that also reach out to help others first, because they've built this rapport, this network of people, these, I don't call them favors, but they have people that will help them out when they need it. And then you'll find it's one of those synergizing things that now all of a sudden you both get your job done more effectively. And so, we don't, let people consume us. We have a lot of rules about when you're going to go ask for help, you got to have, your ducks in a row, we say, so make sure you show what you've tried. And you'll notice that even on Stack Overflow, notice no one will answer a question unless it's been properly formed and they show what they've tried and that type of thing. So it's not about, none of this is about trying to get someone else to do your work. It's about finding people that like to work with you. You help them, they help you, and then the whole product or whole thing gets done. And we do a lot of this mob team programming as well. You're going to find the complexity of what you have to work on today is going to have user interfaces and databases and payment systems and cloud hosting and all kinds of stuff that it's hard for one expert or one person to be an expert in, but everybody can bring something. And so these mob and team programming techniques were really introduced to the world by Woody Zuhl, and it's fairly recent. But if you read about that, and you'll just be amazed at, you got this really hard problem to solve, and it's got a really tight deadline. Try it just for a little bit, and even try it after hours once, or try it, in your own time. Like, let's mob program and see how this goes. And as Woody says that, we discovered it because no one would have thought this would have worked, but you'll be blown away how when people come together, they solve the problem more quickly than if they were working alone on their individual tasks. You'll see some of the NCR slogans or throughout time, they reference this type of thing. It's we make transactions easier, we make life easier. It's a big tenet of what we do at the company, but it's also what you can do in your everyday life as a software engineer and computer engineer. So we don't want manual QA, and QA is quality assurance. So it's like testing or making sure products are ready to be released. We automate everything. We look for things that are tedious that people wouldn't like to do, and we figure out a way to make that automatic, and we get pretty smart with it, and we know how to simulate hardware, and emulate hardware to fake servers, to fake barcode scans. Noah did a lot of this with his with mocking and his Go server, so we're automating everything. So I can run all 1,300 test cases of Mobile Shopper with a click of a button, and it takes less than a minute. And you're like, oh, neat. That would have taken me a lifetime to do on my own. And then I walk around the company looking for, and it's typically, it's people that I've worked with before. I kind of see what they're doing, but one of the things I'm looking for in the back of my head is what's tedious or what could be done more quickly. And you're not automating anybody out of a job. You're creating more value. And then our whole business at NCR is self-checkout. We're automating or making it more automatic to scan items and shop at a store. And that makes the store more successful. They hire more people. So it's one of those synergistic things if you're making things more efficient across the board. And then as you meet developers, you'll find out how true these things are. And as you probably know yourself, or as you get further in your career, you'll see the humor and the truth in these three virtues of a programmer. Because you're lazy, you're going to automate everything. And so you'll hear some of the best programmers at Microsoft. This is what they look for because they're going to get that efficiency out of them because they don't really want to do anything repetitively. They also don't want to wait. So we're going to make things faster. Steve Jobs is famous for finding one of his Macintosh developers, and he did not like the startup time. It took 2 minutes for the computer to get up and running, and he's just like challenged that guy, like, you got to take a minute out of this. He's like, I can't. I've done everything I can. And then Steve explains how many he's going to sell. He's like, well, we're going to sell 10 million of these units, and if you take a minute and multiply it by every person that's going to buy one of our computers, you're saving 100 lives. So think 100 lives depend on you making this faster. And then the guy made it quicker, even though he thought he could do everything he could. And then hubris. A lot of people don't know what this word means, but it's the excessive pride of, like, when someone gives you a task to do, of course I'll do that, and my code will be perfect. It's that pride of a good engineer of, like, and we talked about a little bit earlier, be self-reliant. If not me, then who? And so, and if you treat your engineering work that way, you'll do the best work you possibly can. We've all run into code that's hard to read. We'll do it in school projects. We'll see it from other people we work with. People, in fact, will try to make their code complex on purpose, and there's somehow they think that's job security of, like, hey, I'm going to be the only person that knows how to work on this, and all you're really doing is just making it so your product doesn't scale, other people can't work on it, and it won't be as successful as the competitor where they follow some of the principles like we talked about, API first, community source, common capability, because you're trying to build a community. And so one of the ways to do that is you name your variables things people can read. You put your program flow and your methods into blocks that are much like writing a book. It's fine prose. And if you think of how hard it is to write a good book, it's just as hard to write a well-written program. And then if you think of some of the most famous hackers, I'll use air quotes, you think John Carmack and writing the Doom game on his Nextstep computer, that's some of the most beautiful code you'll ever see. And so I suggest go looking at that stuff, see what these legendary professionals are doing when they write their source code. And it is not something that would look like machine language or assembly code. It is this elegantly done thing that describes what it does, says what it does from here, how to handle this when something goes wrong, what you do next when this thing goes successful. And then as you're reading that, you're like, oh, I can follow this and I can change it and I can make this happen when I want to do something. And so always consider that other human reading your code, and it's not going to run any slower. In fact, it'll be faster because you'll know how to make it more efficient and streamline it and get that thing to happen that you couldn't quite figure out. And you'll see the modern languages we're using today, C#, Go, Java, Node, they have not so much ugly syntax and much more elegance and structure, and so that tells a much better story than some of the older languages that you think of, C and C++, and which is now starting to get replaced by Rust, and Go is also can be used for system level stuff. And then of course assembly and machine code, which probably is no way to make pretty. This is what actually Steve Jobs was the best at, and when people worked with him, they wonder, what made him what he was, and it was this quality. And it's so much harder to do than we might think. But when we're doing software and engineering, if we can put our whole head against the problem we're trying to solve, like shut off the phone, like clear the distractions, and really focus on making, say, this multiplier in silicon, or getting this component of software to work just the way I want it, and or focus on this bug that's just been, plaguing this product for a couple months. And that's all you're working on. And it's called monotasking sometimes. And so instead of trying to say, hey, I'm going to do these two things at once, which we have to do on occasion, but when you get to the big problems, figure out how to clear the noise and say, no, this is what I'm going to focus on. And then you'll see it in our Kanban process, which is an old Japanese manufacturing process, where you pull tickets from the left side, sort of a volunteer, you own it, but you don't work on more than one at once. And it's a huge red flag. You might think, oh, that person can do so much. They've got 5 tickets. No, they're just not focusing. And then in a team setting, you'll get these in group projects. You'll notice how often the conversation can go adrift, or sometimes we call it squirrels, like the distractions go. And we even pick what we call a safe word up front, where I think we used squirrel in our team, of like, hey, that's a distraction. And it had a little bit of meaning in that the Italian word for squirrel was the acronym of our team for SCO Innovation. But we say that as a nice way to say, hey, maybe we should mind the conversation that's not about what we're focusing on, and shift it to what we are. And then you're not telling anybody anything rude to, get them to stop talking, or, sharing everything about the weekend. It's important to hear all that stuff, and you want to leave time for it. But when you're in problem-solving mode, giving people a safe out to say, hey, maybe we should focus, that's a really effective technique when working with teams, and it tends not to offend anybody if it's a polite word that you all agreed on up front. So you'll think, oh, there's an architect, or there's a product owner, or there's a manager, or there's a UX designer, or have they done research on this? And so as an engineer, all you have to do is, implement this thing that they came up with and design, and you don't have to make all these decisions about the user experience, where it just isn't true. Even with like our top tier design where I work today, like I said, I've worked at Hewlett Packard, like world-class designers and researchers and user experience people. But as an engineer, you still have all these micro decisions you have to make about, would this be useful? Is this the right sequence? Is that the right keyboard shortcut? What should the tab order be? What's the first thing the person's going to do when they see this? Should all these things fit on the screen, or should I find a way to make it responsive? What are people with small phones and big phones going to do? What are people with wide screens and tall screens going to do? And so you get way more than you might think, and it might be 5 to 10 a day of these micro decisions you have to make. And if you're designing those and making those decisions with the user perspective, your software is going to work better. You thought about how this person's going to experience whatever they're doing, because you got to think all of our software in the end is going to serve people one way or another. And those people are users, and they're like, how do I dive into this? How do I make this function? What screen am I going to see if this error happens? and then you'll be trusted more to make good working products. But everything we do is with that user in mind, and this is also part of some of the empathy and sort of emotional intelligence. The user, you are not always your user, so you think, and as if you do design thinking and study personas, you'll start to get a better feel for who your user is. And like I said, I travel a lot, and I'm the architect for Mobile Shopper. I love Mobile Shopper because it's cool and I can walk around the store and buy my stuff and check prices on everything. But the real user is like the person that has to take care of the a home. And so they come in with these big baskets. They want to save time. They might have a kid with them, and they don't want any Mickey Mousing going on in the shopping experience. And they don't want to have to track their shopping list on a piece of paper. They don't want to have to sit there totaling everything on a calculator. They want to see how much money they're spending, as they run through the shopping trip. And then once you get that idea in your head, you're like, oh yeah, we should show the total all the time, and we should pull your shopping list from the server, and make things check off as you buy them. And so you think of all those things that make that experience just right. They might not have thought about 100% when will, but when you understand that user, you're going to make the little decisions to make sure your software works. And it's going to relate to what we talk about next, which is by far the most important. But just keep that in mind. Whatever you're working on, whatever someone's paying you to do, has a user somewhere, and that user might be another engineer or even another piece of software that someone has to write an API interface for. But don't lose sight of this throughout your day as you're working on your technology. Well, I've quoted Steve Jobs a few times, and his most blunt and abrupt and true thing is real developers ship. And so if you think about this, what he's talking about is we're making stuff because we want it to get used. And if you find the engineers that get motivated because your stuff is getting used, that's gonna be the best engineer. They're just like, they can't wait to get this in front of people. Yeah, someone's going to find a problem, it, but it's also some of that be self-reliant. If not me, then who? And so if they're picking your product and they're coming to you to get this piece of technology done, they could go anywhere else in the world to get this this technology problem solved or this business problem solved, but they're coming to you. And so you're going to do whatever it takes to get what you're working on delivered. You don't want a half-done project. You don't want something that has lots of bugs in it. You don't want something that's going to come back, return to sender. You're putting this thing in a package one way or another and getting it out in front of customers. And you care about their success or how they are going to use it or what it's going to do for them. And then if we talk about, say, what made AMD successful again is, she knew there was still a giant space for desktop computers and high performance computers. It's like, so we don't have to build things we're not good at. Let's focus on what we're really good at, and it's sometimes called core competence. And if you're an engineer working on something, like, you don't want your project to be canceled, you don't want it to be not finished on time, you're gonna, and sometimes I call this landing the plane. You know when that deadline is, you know when that contract was signed for, you know how much time you have, and then you're working each little task so it's high quality, has enough automation, does what it's supposed to do without any extra, and it's sort of that know what to say no to versus what to say yes to, and gets that person's problem solved. And then we're targeting this thing is called delight. And so you want to delight your users with the things you make, get them to realize that they wanted something that they couldn't even describe to you, but you saw what they needed, you made it, and then it got in their hands, and then you get pumped when you see it's being used. When you think about what we work on today, self-checkout, more items are scanned through self-checkout every year than there are people on Earth. And so you think of how massive that is, or if you've gone to Walmart or other places where it's installed, it's completely massive, and we get excited about that. And of course, we want mobile shoppers in many countries, but it's going to be the next thing. And then we have so many more innovations coming out. Like I said, my last talk was about augmented reality and virtual reality. Like, we are making the next wave of stuff, and then look for people that love to deliver, that don't have to do stuff. And like I said, real developers ship. So I timed that so we'd have a little bit of time left for questions, but that's the end of my presentation on principle-based leadership.
Thank you, Kip.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Does anybody want to comment, share a story, make any suggestions, give any feedback?
You should post your 7 habits of effective developers. Because I had it on Confluence on NCR, but I didn't take it with me.
Oh yes, yeah. I'm the leftist, so I can send it out. There's nothing confidential in here. Yeah.
That'd be awesome.
All Genghis Khan's principles, Genghis Khan's 9 software development leadership principles.
Those are for you. But you guys remember when I brought those up, everything we were working on, I didn't swarm you with all 7, but we'd say, this is begin with the end in mind. Let's just use the buddy system. So we ease them in, but then you see how effective they all are. And then you guys each went out and formed your own teams for the hackathon and used them. And then these guys are interns, you guys realize, and they placed right up there, with some of the most seasoned developers, in the world. You think of NCR being what I call the oldest technology company in the world. And my 4 interns gave them all a run for their money in the hackathon, and then the product they made, and you'll see it one day. It's pretty awesome, and got some. It's definitely had some motivation to ship. And then I run the store at World Headquarters, so when that opens up again, we'll see some of our new products there, and you guys can all come and visit.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah,
Right.
it'd be cool if we can get a tour. Hopefully, when everything gets better.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Yeah. Could you send me the PowerPoint when you get the chance?
Yeah, no problem.
I want to keep it for the group channel.
Yep, I can.
All right.
All right. So yeah, you've got my contact, and I encourage everybody to apply for internships anywhere, but definitely try for NCR. I've got a world-class internship program. And then if you're looking to graduate soon, there's lots of university recruiting events that you can buy and see.
You have to contact university relations. They don't take applications on the website anymore, right?
I don't know. You'd know better than me, but like I said, Noah and Jim were both interns, and it was fantastic having them, and we always want more. And new college hires.
So if you're interested, the university relations team, they go to different hackathons and campus events. I don't know if they come to our career fairs or not, but I think they do. And then you talk to them, and that's your way in for an internship.
Yeah. I don't think I saw them at this semester's career fair, but maybe the next.
I think, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe every other semester.
Maybe I didn't see them in spring either, so I'm not sure. Cause maybe they just weren't doing it last year, so I'm not entirely sure. But yeah.
Okay.
You
We'll reach out.
Sorry.
Oh yeah, if you even email me, I can send you over the right person if you're interested. So that's my email address.
Yeah. That would be great. I think, Noah, do you have the contact for university relations for NCR?
It's a team. Just talk to Kip.
Okay. Oh, okay. That's cool. That's cool. All right. I'll keep that in mind. Yeah. I know there's a lot of graduating seniors in the club right now and new freshmen. So we have a wide variety of students.
Awesome. Yeah, and like I said, my talk at that what we call the unconference, it was one of the most popular at the company, and Noah came. We got lots of participants, but the future is bright. It was all about augmented reality and virtual reality and how that ties into business and transactions.
Really cool.
All right, well, thanks everybody for coming. I'll send it out. And,
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming to talk to us today.
Thank you.
We really appreciate
Thanks
it.
for your time.
Yeah, this was great. Thanks.
All right. Thank you everyone for coming. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, feel free to email me or Kip. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your day. I'll stay back if anyone has questions for me or the officers. Did you guys enjoy this event?
It was great. It was good.
Oh yeah, it's like that.
You should apply. Yeah, Paul, you guys are graduating soon.
Yeah, I'm applying. Definitely. I'm gonna reach out to him, see what's going on.
Yeah, we'll see.
We'll see. What's offered.
No, it's not awkward. It's just it was good. It was good. We'll see. Like I said.
I mean, like
It's our first virtual event, so I didn't expect too much excitement.
This is good insight into the company.
Mm-hmm.
Do you need anything? Like, I did accept that Our Life. Do you need anything?
Yeah, we're finally approved, so we have a join button, thankfully. Yeah,
Why do you have to rejoin?
No, you're still in there. I think it was like because they didn't approve us. They didn't give us a join button, so no one could join until we got approved. So, but now I think if you go on Our Life, there's a join button. But if you don't see it, then you're already in the club. So, but I think I saw you already, Noah.
Okay, cool.
You're safe.
Well, I'm gonna head out. So, see you guys.
Yeah.
Bye, Paul.
If no one has any more questions, you're free to go. Thank you guys for coming.
Of course.
All right. Bye.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.